Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome to ACE, Act, Change, Emerge. While you settle down, maybe have a short AV on IIFL Wealth.
In 2008, IIFL Wealth dreamt big. Today, we are the leaders in wealth and asset management, credit solutions, and succession planning. With more than $27 billion of assets under management, the trust of over 6,500 families. We've achieved this faster than any other Indian financial enterprise, not by following the cardinal rules of financial success, but by writing our own. We've challenged the definition of conventional management and proved that conviction and hard work are the fastest routes to success. We haven't hired employees. We've attracted people with an owner's mindset. Because when you own something, success becomes personal. Ours is a company where owners work and workers own. Today, we can put an exact number on the revenue we've generated, the profits we've made, the taxes paid, the awards we've won, and the number of lives we've transformed. What we can't put a number on is the unending trust we've built. It's not without reason that we've chosen the Shri Yantra to define our purpose. With a symbol that embodies Goddess Lakshmi's tool to create unending wealth, we are well prepared for the next decade and more. We are here. We are now. We are IIFL Wealth.
Thank you. To take this evening forward, we have, along with Mr. Divyang Turakia, two gentlemen who will keep the conversation flowing. Yatin Shah, co-founder and joint CEO of IIFL Wealth, and Anas Rahman, the co-founder of Hurun India, who is an authority on all about the wealthy in India. Over to you, Anas, to take this evening forward.
Thank you, Anil. Very good evening, everyone, to the second episode of ACE, Act, Change, and Emerge. This property, or what we're doing today, is an extension of what Hurun Report stands for, which is about celebrating transparent wealth creation. Just to give you some statistics about Hurun and when we started, about 10 years back, when we put out the first rich list, we found about 100 individuals in the list. From that, the list has gone on to become 1,000 individuals in the rich list, which is yet to be launched. India, what Hurun stands for is about speaking about transparent wealth creation and stories of Indian economy through the eyes of entrepreneur. And today is, in fact, a very momentous day. One of the first startup IPO has been, open for public for subscription. And before all that happened, about 4 or 5 years back, Div Turakia, who's here with us today, he has demonstrated a full cycle of founding a startup in India and exiting and creating value in the ecosystem. So once again, welcome you all to the second episode of ACE. And this is a very interactive session. So throughout the session, you could post your questions in the Q&A bar. We are more than happy to break away from our set list of questions and ask Div and make him answer all the questions that you might have. Over to you, Anil. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anas. And it's time to move on to what we all have been waiting for. We are privileged to have with us a gentleman who started coding at a very young age, an entrepreneur at 14 years. And by the time he was in his 20s, his initiatives were leading the advertising technology industry in India, and eventually made him one of India's youngest billionaires. But before he comes on to our screens, we have a very short video to welcome him. May we have the video, please? Thank you. Over to you, Yatin and Anas, to take this evening forward with Mr. Divyang Turakia.
Thank you, Anil. Thank you, Anas. We are so glad to have you with us today on this webinar. What a story, Divyang. You are a role model to so many of young founders and entrepreneurs who have some great ideas, some crazy ones, some unconventional ones, who need encouragement to simply do it and go for it. And you have shown this fantastic what you've done with your own journey. Thank you once again for joining us for this webinar, Divyang. Let me start with a question, and then we'll keep this conversation free-flowing. You have been an entrepreneur for the last 20 years, and you chose to take a break from your business. I've not heard many entrepreneurs doing that. And you have, in fact, finished three innings now, and now you're on a break. Tell me, you've also got this timing right, perfect, right? You just began your break before the COVID started.
Thank you for having me, and Anas, you too. No, I did not break COVID. And to be fair, my break started on Jan 1st, 2019, a year before COVID started. It's both fortunate timing and unfortunate timing in that sense. I mean, none of us wanted a pandemic to happen. But yeah, and has been a great journey, and I've been fortunate to be able to take a break, which is always good. I mean, to your point earlier, I started very young, and for the last 20 something years, 22 years, I hadn't done anything but basically build businesses. So when I exited the third business, selling it in 2016, and then completed my transition with the new owners around 2018, I decided that, look, if I don't step down now and take some time off, I just won't be able to do that once you get started on the next one, because as soon as you start a business and you start anything, really, you can't time how long you're going to run it, because you can't time an exit. Because most businesses that you start, it typically takes you a couple of years to make the business material in size. And from an exit standpoint, if that's your eventual goal with that business, the timing is somewhere between 5 to 15 years for most businesses. So, and once you start something, there's nothing that you can do but 100% of your time, or as much of your time as possible, on building that business if you, again, want it to become material.
And so kind of introduced saying that when you were 14 and you started coding, and today every parent, are kind of getting their kids to code, and there's so many of the online classes of coding and things like that. How did coding happen to you? And I'd love to hear the earlier part of your journey.
Sure. I mean, the early part, again, just happy to repeat it. I started programming when I was 8 or 9 years old. And the way that started was both me and my brother used to love playing video games, and we used to play them all the time, just like every other 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old who's on their screen today all the time. I think my parents were smart enough to kind of channel that towards something more productive. And I don't know where it came from, because if you look at my dad's tech skills, I mean, today on his iPhone, he can use the iPhone for making a call and using his WhatsApp. For anything else, it's just too complicated for him. But he came to us when we were really young, and he's like, hey, you like playing these video games? Would you like to get better at them? And we're like, yeah, absolutely. And the end result of that was, he's like, look, if you knew how they were built, then you would be better playing them. And that obviously logic stuck. So he said yes. And this is pre-internet days, right? You're talking about 1990, so early 90s. I mean, there was no internet. In fact, when you wanted to buy a book, I remember my dad used to go into town in Mumbai and order the book. The book would come months later on some ship after you ordered it at the bookstore. Obviously, things have changed materially since then. And we bought a bunch of computer programming books on just game programming, and that's what got us started.
Great. So I'll straight away ask one question that's come in the Q&A box, and it's related to your introduction. What is the reason that so many capable people do not make it big? Could you have any insights on that?
I mean, there's always a luck factor. So let's remove the luck factor, right? Because I mean, there are lots of people that will put in a lot of effort, and sometimes it just doesn't work. but that's extremely rare is what I would say. I would say most people, as long as they continue to evolve in the way they're doing something, because it's not about just about the amount of hours that you put in or the effort you put in, right? I mean, the farmer today puts in more effort than you and I in all circumstances, but it doesn't mean that he's more successful from a monetary standpoint. He might be more successful from other standpoints. So from a monetary standpoint, it's more around, look, whatever it is that you're doing, how do you optimize it ongoingly in order to figure out how to grow it, how to automate it, how to add efficiency, and how do you keep learning and applying those learnings onto whatever it is that you're building. And everybody fails. Like there isn't someone who starts and on day 3 they're successful or day 10 they're successful. You will fail a whole bunch of times before you succeed. And don't count that as failing. It's really the path to success. So I'd say if you didn't make it, it's because you just stopped learning or you stopped doing in most circumstances. Obviously, there are exceptions to everything, but in most circumstances, it would be because you didn't keep figuring out what are the resources that you have and what is the best that you can do with those resources. And then how do you up level continuously in that I would say would be the primary reason, giving up.
Yeah, I'll possibly ask one question. What if you had not solved media.net today? Would it have been more valuable? And if so, what would be the kind of valuation, considering all the startup valuations and all that you see in the market?
Look, I mean, in all exits, timing exits are impossible. And I can tell you that I've met lots and lots of tech founders and non-tech founders now, especially in MedRec. And for everyone who would basically say, if I had held on to this thing, this would be worth more, and hopefully it should be worth more as you keep building on to any business. Over time, yes, it would be worth more. In some sense, in a couple of, so let me, one is the valuations today, the multiples, just from a sheer multiple expansion standpoint, are much higher than what they used to be. I mean, when I sold media.net, we were doing about, or we were projected in 2016 to do about $60 million PAT, and we sold on a financial multiple of 15x. These days, the financial multiples are based on revenue multiples in the same industry and in all industries, so things are very different. I mean, you can't look at it that way. You can't look at it and say that, hey, you sold it for shy of $1 billion. If you kept it, maybe it's worth 10 billion, maybe it's worth 20, maybe it's worth 2, maybe it could have been worth 0. I mean, there's no way to know what that situation would have been, because for every instance where it would have been worth 10, I can give you lots and lots of examples of where it could have been worth less or more or as per market. And all of those, there are too many factors that go into any of that. I think when we sold, the idea was it made sense for everybody on the table at that point of time. It made sense for the buyers. It made sense for us. It basically, the whole idea was it would help us expand, help the team expand what it is doing further, and that happened for a while. So, I mean, you can't time exits, and on all 3 of them, I would say basically when we sold, maybe we left some money on the table.
Conversation before, entrepreneur, long way to go. You're still under 40 or just around 40. Successful business, the whole time taken from ideation to hitting it big has narrowed significantly. What used to take 10, 15 years is.
You're right, very, very significantly, right? And in fact, a couple of reasons for that. First, I mean, obviously, if you look at anybody who's done X number of things, and that was to the earlier point, the first few times you do something, it takes time for you to figure out how to go about doing that, right? So for instance, the first time that we hired our first set of people and then our next set of people to get to about 100 people in terms of team size, it had taken us 6 years to get to that. Then the next 100 people we added in a year after that. The next 250 people we added in a year after that. So as we learn, we can basically do stuff faster. So that's one that, obviously someone, the first time that you do anything, or first time anyone does anything, it really doesn't matter who the entrepreneur is. It's going to take some time to basically have those learnings, and the next time it's going to be faster. But I think the point you were trying to make, and which is very right today, is you can go from zero to unicorn to decacorn faster today than in any other prior age, primarily because a lot of the services that allow you to expand are available. I remember the first business I ran, which is about 20 years ago. If we wanted to expand, we needed to pre-plan by 6 months in terms of, hey, we need, let's say, server infrastructure, or we need this type of infrastructure, or we basically need to plan and build for other types of services that are not core to our service. So for example, in the first business, when we ran it and we started signing up customers from outside of India, there was no payment gateway in India. So we had to basically build our own to collect money from our own international customers, which is a business by itself. So a lot of the plumbing tools that exist today didn't exist earlier. And in fact, that pace is only going to go much faster. Also, today, a lot more things can go a lot more viral in terms of adoption. So if you are, let's say, 10% better or 20% better than the next competitor, you could basically gain market share far quicker today because everybody wants to use the top 5 companies or top 10 companies, right? So if you can figure out how to build your product such that the product performs better, and you do get a little bit of the rest right in terms of sales and marketing, it is very likely that if you have an offering that adds value, your offering is going to get a lot more adoption, a lot more faster, at a lot cheaper cost than what it used to be, right? I mean, today, cost of acquiring each customer from a usage standpoint is extremely low in comparison to, it used to be 100x or 500x, which made lots of businesses unviable back then, but much more viable today, which is why you can scale today and say that, oh, I can get from 0 users to 100 million users in a year, and that can happen. And it's possible to make that happen. And you can basically outsource a lot of the non-core activities today, which you couldn't have earlier. Absolutely.
But that brings me to the question, when I look at what's happening and going around, and there's so many, maybe it's more of the media attention being caught by a particular industry, maybe consumer tech, technology, everything around it. I sometimes feel, if you're not doing technology, not an engineer, not a coder, what is there for you? What are your views? I mean, love to hear. I
think that's not the case at all. Like, obviously, technology is a big growth factor. And if I look at the last 20 years, technology as a sector in all markets has done really well and will continue to do well because every industry needs to adopt technology, but you don't have to have that technology background. I think there are enough entrepreneurs out there that have shown that they may not be from tech and they've done really well in whatever industry that they're in. I think the best way I would look at it is if I look at the top 1,000 companies in the world today by market cap or by revenue that are first generation, right? So this is not something that is like third generation and your grandfather built it and you basically got it and you added onto it. But if you look at the top 1,000 companies by market cap, first generation, you'll find that not all of them are tech. They're spread across every industry. They're spread across healthcare, they're spread across hospitality, they're spread across finance, they're spread across. So they might use tech components to help enable their business to provide better services, but the core of the business might be in another industry. So it doesn't matter what industry you are in, there is an opportunity to basically build a multi-billion-dollar business because there are other companies that have already done it. So somebody else has done it and somebody else has done it first generation. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to do the same thing in a better form, because the other thing that happens generally is, one of the things that people get confused with is, hey, this is already being done. This opportunity is already complete. This industry is already overcrowded, or there are too many companies in this space already. Where's the opportunity for me? I'd say that is the opportunity, right? Because if there are too many companies in the space, it is because there is enough money in the space. And there is no way that any company, no matter how many resources that they have, will be able to service every customer. You'll always be able to find some underserved set of customers. So pick an industry, any industry that's large, and you'll be able to find underserved customers in that, and you'll be able to gain market share in that. And you don't, obviously there's an advantage to having basic tech knowledge at the very minimum. And there's an advantage to being more tech because tech kind of enables efficiency in many ways. But if you're not, I mean, use whatever is your core strength. I've seen lots of organizations that have sales core strengths. And they're sales founders that think of everything through a sales lens, and they do extremely well, right? So whatever is your primary strength, you want to double down on that primary strength and figure out how to use that in order to capture more market share in whatever industry that you're in.
Any industry, technology creates disruption through bringing a lot of efficiency and time to turn around, can create value in that industry.
I mean, think about it like about 50, 100 years ago. I mean, the industrial revolution happened. I mean, at that point in time, you'll be like anybody that can basically buy machines is going to run a more efficient company. I mean, it's not just about buying machines, right? It's about figuring out how to use that efficiently in your process. So it's the same thing now. It's not about just basically saying that, oh, let's basically throw a bunch of tech people at this. It's about figuring out how to basically create a better experience, create a more efficient experience, create a more cost-effective experience. So figure out what the value adds are overall and how you can add them and how you can layer them. And whether that is tech or non-tech or completely outsourcing tech. Because I mean, there's so many tools available today. You might be in an industry where you can just basically license so many SaaS software that is available for your space, but run that business far more efficiently without actually owning the software. So growth is possible whether you're tech or non-tech. Growth, obviously, I mean, if you do know tech, there is an edge, but that edge isn't to a point where it's not possible for you to basically get over that.
Great. A lot of questions pouring in from the audience, so I'll probably mix and match these questions, so that'll be useful. So one question from Mr. Abhidam Singh, his question is, Divyang, does a startup have a global product to attract investor interest? Is in India a large enough market by itself?
So today for investments, I would say that India is definitely a large enough market. I mean, 15 years ago, I would say that India wasn't. But today, I think a lot more people are online, and thanks to a lot of basic infrastructure that has been added, everybody has a phone, everybody's connected for cheap, and everybody's doing transactions, which wasn't the case, now is the case. I'd say that when you are starting, yes, have a global outlook, but start in any niche market because you want to focus on one market first. You could even start in a small city and say, let me figure out how to capture the city, make it work for the city and replicate it across 20 other cities. Once I've replicated across 20 other cities in my country, then let me figure out how to replicate it across other countries, right? Your path can be, your path will require lots of steps, but essentially, and you can't just say that on day one, oh, I'm going to be in 220 countries and I need $3 trillion to basically deploy and hire everybody out there in order to be able to do so, or else this is not going to be possible. Look, everybody's going to be constrained in some form. So I would say always figure out what's the niche you want to start with and start taking those baby steps. At the back of your mind, always, whenever you're building something, it takes maybe the 10-15% extra amount of time, but productify it from the beginning with the idea that this could be global in the future. So you already have currency as a functionality in your mind. You already have global tax as your functionality in your mind. You already have global operations or changes in certain minor behaviors that you have in your mind while you're productifying it. It takes not as much. Even if you didn't do it, that's okay. Just then focus only on your market and what's really good for that market. And then you will add those functionalities or those features later. And that's not a big deal also. So whatever way you do it, just basically you have to start with baby steps, capture some amount, and then keep growing from there. And that's how everybody grows.
Yeah, before I pass the ball to Yatin, another question is related to first a bunch of things. Living a life of an entrepreneur in your teenage life, right? So what is your suggestion or advice to current group of teenagers? Or should they go and complete their education, graduation, post-graduation, or should I just jump into entrepreneurship? What would your advice be?
How many parents do I want to piss off?
No, you have to share your wisdom.
I would say that education is really good because learning is really good, right? That learning can never stop. So when you say, I want to stop going through the education path, I think what you mean at that point of time is, I don't want to spend 100% of my time in some sort of formal education, which is generalized, and I'm not specializing in anything. Because when you start something today, if you do start something in your teens, there are many things that you don't know, which means you have to keep learning. If you stop learning, you're never going to be successful. And like my mom used to always tell me that if I'm going to drop out, I'm going to basically go and run a chai shop. Luckily, that did not happen. But
you would have been Narendra Modi. You know, don't say that.
Yes, I mean, I would not I mean, he's a story by himself and a legend by himself. I would not know how to replicate that. But I know I agree with you. Like wherever you start, it really doesn't matter as long as you keep learning, and as long as you keep learning. And let me keep repeating that because no matter how you start, no matter whether you get it through a formal education route, and that is a very good way to get it, as long as you focus on figuring out what are your core strengths, how do I keep learning within my core strengths, how do I specialize earlier, and how do I basically keep adding to that specialization earlier so that I can become world class at something. And the faster you can do it, the better it is. The earlier you can do it, the better it is. But if you didn't do it early, it doesn't really matter because there are lots of entrepreneurs that have started much later in life. Like the KFC founder, it started at 65, right? As I read a Bloomberg survey that said that the average successful startup founder is 45. So it doesn't, while there are founders that could have been like a Mark Zuckerberg and started in his teens, there are founders that have started in their 30s, there are founders that have started in their 40s, there are founders that have started in their 60s. There is no right age. As long as you're willing to put in the effort ongoingly and keep learning and keep being okay with the fact that, look, along the learning process, obviously you will fail lots and lots and lots of times, and that's okay. And you learn from each one of them and don't keep trying to do the same thing over and over again, expect a different outcome. I think, you know, you'll eventually get to the compounding of learning, because every year that compounds in terms of what you know, and that will basically help you to get to a point where you're far more specialized than everybody else in that space that has done less of learning, and that will basically make you more successful. So what's the right age to start something? Whatever feels right for you. It could be, it could be 10, I think, and it could also be 90. I mean, Charlie Munger is in his 97, I think, and he's still running Berkshire. So.
Okay.
Love to hear your views on what are the top trends you see in technology industry in next 10, 15 years. How do you see as an investor? I mean, when you look back, look ahead, what do you think was going to happen?
Great. So I can tell you what we're doing at the family office in how we are thinking of our investments. I think something that we don't understand as well, just like, we obviously have an edge in tech because we understand tech really well. And I'll talk about that in a bit, but we think that biotech is where tech was 20 years ago. So we think that obviously 20 years ago, if you think about where tech was, and a lot of people were like fiddling around with it, and this was the time when they're still not sure how the internet is going to really scale and change our lives, and some people got it and some people didn't. I think biotech is where that is, and so if you want to be an early investor and understand, but unlike tech, which was a lot more easier to understand, biotech requires a lot more formal education to fully grasp the details of it. So I think that's essentially what we're trying to do, at least from our end, is work with the right fund managers that specialize in that area, and work with the right vendors that will know and understand that space well, so that we can deploy capital against it. Within tech itself, I really like AI and machine learning as a space. I really like enterprise SaaS. I think enterprise SaaS is something that will keep expanding for at least the next decade. And enterprise SaaS is not hard to understand, and the stickiness is a lot better. So it's much easier to identify the winners. So you can basically do that safely and make longer term investments. Unlike AI, in AI, unless you fully understand the details, it's harder to figure out who the winners are going to be. I'd say 5G is going to create lots and lots of opportunity. And I would say that there will be new innovation that no one's thought of or as of right now. Like when you first saw the iPhone, you were like, wow. I think 5G is going to bring in things where you will basically go, wow, which you haven't thought of. I think tech in certain spaces, like tech in healthcare, like telehealth or using data for decisions, tech in finance, tech in education. I think those are areas that, again, in tech that are going to be very interesting. Cybersecurity, again, next 10 years, I mean, the budgets will just have to be there because everything is online, and the risks of that. And we're seeing that every month now. I mean, the wars used to be offline. Now the wars seem to be going online. And that basically means cybersecurity as a space will continue to get more and more investments and need them. And remote working. I mean, COVID's basically, obviously, I mean, the good side of COVID, and I would say one of the only upsides is it's made remote working as an experiment, no longer an experiment. It works. It works in many senses. It doesn't work in certain things. And now a lot of the businesses know where it works and where it doesn't with the current tool sets that are available. And I think those tool sets will keep getting better. And so that will be another area in which we will continue to invest. And obviously in tech, another thing to keep in mind is, and not just tech, in any investing, is what are you buying at? Like, what's the valuation? What's your buying point? What's your entry point? Because obviously some of these themes might be overbought at times. And when they're overbought, they basically are just expensive. So unless you have a very long-term view, you want to kind of figure out how to average into some of these things, because it's going, if you're not really within that industry sector, it's going to be harder for you to figure out what the right entry point is going to be.
Hand it over to you. Last question to him. You spoke about what value you're buying. So believe you've invested in Robinhood, you've invested in even in SpaceX, and number of new age Indian companies are yet to be profitable and set for listing. What are the traditional value metrics may not really be applied to these companies? How do you look at such companies or startups? You must be doing some kind of
So at the end of the day, all valuation is, in my mind, is based on DCF. And I think that's the case with a lot of the institutional investors anyway. So it is based on DCF. But I think what's much smarter organizations and larger organizations or larger funds are able to do today is they're better able to predict what the DCF will be in the future. For a company that is still at a very early stage, and for many years, they're not going to still make profits because they've seen this pattern somewhere else in the world. Now, if you think about India, India is about 10 years behind the developed markets in terms of where its startups or I wouldn't say where its startups are in terms of maturity, I'd say more where its users are in terms of maturity. So where today in the US, where a normal user is used to doing X number of tasks in a certain way, the Indian consumer will take some amount of time to adapt, but the pace of adoption is going to be faster than what had happened in the developed markets, because the pace of adoption is always faster for any market that you enter into a later stage, which is like an example in India. So I think what FIIs and institutional investors that are large outside are much better able to do is figure out and build models that will be able to predict that if you have these users and this is your user growth and this is your revenue growth, then you can likely add these 5 other things, because we've seen the 6 other companies in these 6 other markets do that. So we can better predict what that model is going to be. And hence you're seeing, when you just look at somebody's balance sheet or P&L and you're like, oh, if that's their balance sheet and P&L, why is their valuation like so much more than this other traditional company that's already listed, that's already basically got a lot more profits, but is valued much lesser. So it's always about growth, and it's always about what you can get to and what you can add in terms of skill levels of the current org and where it's like what's the moat that's already created and what it is likely to create. So I think those models have become much better. And based on those models, I think there are lots of funds that are willing to take those kind of bets because they've seen those bets pan out in other markets.
Yeah.
Love to hear your SpaceX story on how did you ended up investing in SpaceX.
This is a funny story. So it's I'm good friends with someone who's on the board at SpaceX. He basically, when I first started spending time with him, he's like, dude, you have to invest in this business. It's going to be massive. And I'm like, okay. I'm looking at the business and I'm like, I don't get it. Like how, I mean, it loses money. How are you going to make money from space? And again, when you start with something, you don't have to always, you're never going to understand things until you spend time with it. So I think the valuation was somewhere in the 20s in terms of billion. It was somewhere in the 20 billions. Then I said, no, I'm not looking at investing. And at the same time, the round is highly oversubscribed. So it's really hard to get allocation. Here I'm getting allocation. I didn't take it in the 20s. And he came back to me when it was raising in the 30s. And he's like, dude, you should really invest. I said, no. Then he came back in the 40s, and I said no. Then he came back in the 60s. I said no. And then basically I looked back and I'm like, holy shit, I could have basically invested in the 20s. And at the same time, it really doesn't matter because now that I have spent more time understanding it, and better late than never, I see how the business makes sense. I see how Starlink would change the world. I see how there's so many additional applications that would exist. And I invested in the last round at 72.5 billion as valuation. So because I still think that from here, the opportunity obviously is much bigger. And so sometimes, I mean, I think another example of it is Microsoft. I mean, 10 years ago, there are lots of folks are like, oh, Microsoft's awesome, you should buy it. It looks expensive, and it looks expensive every year. Every year that you look at Microsoft, it might look expensive, but the next year it just seemed cheaper as compared to last year. So I think the more you understand the core of any business, the more comfortable you can get around it. And in fact, I think that's really important, right? When you're investing, there are two strategies. One strategy is just basically buy the index and buy into everything and go in a risk managed form, and you basically make what the market's making. But the other strategy is basically you study only 10, 15 companies because that's the max that you can fully understand and spend time to track. And you invest in 10, 15 companies and average out in that form, and you might get the same standard deviation as you buy in the index, but you might get a lot more alpha that you create for yourself. And in just like anything else, invest only in what you fully understand. If you don't understand it and you want to just invest in the sector, I'd say just use the right vendors for that, because there are enough really smart people that are running enough smart funds, both private and public, that will basically be able to help you get access and help you better manage that process.
Great. I think a lot more questions have come on the Q&A side. Possibly one question from an anonymous attendee, but on a lighter note, how long do you intend to remain one of India's most eligible bachelor?
I think I might have been my mom. Is my mom online?
It says anonymous, so it could be possible.
She's been asking me not the most eligible question, but more around how long are you going to remain single since just 24? Been a while.
Yeah, so I'm not going to. I'll go to the next question.
Again, I guess just Great. Like business, there is a luck factor that plays in. Some people are lucky to meet people that they want to spend the rest of their lives with early, and some people it takes time, and time will come.
Great. One question from Anubhav Agarwal. This question is, what is the future of healthcare single APIs in India? Since no player has it, which is leveraging consumer data and solving problems for patients in hospital at scale, is it happening a lot in the Valley, and is it a multi-trillion-dollar market? It's a very specific question on healthcare.
I think healthcare globally is very broken in comparison to where it should be. I think markets like India actually are better and can do much smarter things, because in the US it's so heavily regulated because of HIPAA, and not just heavy. There's nothing wrong with it being regulated, but because there are lots of vested interests and lobbies that are protecting the way things, that are not allowing for changes as quickly. I think the innovation can happen in a market like India much faster, and can be much more helpful to people, because certain things may not be as important to people in India. Like, I mean, if I am the average consumer in India, I'm not, I understand, but for the average consumer in India, I mean, privacy is going to be a lot lesser important about using their data as compared to making sure that they get higher quality of healthcare and faster and cheaper. And I'm happy to share all of my health data at any point of time. And I think a lot of Indians would culturally be okay with it if that helps other people. So I think a lot more can be done in India from a data usage standpoint. Obviously, the challenge with India is going to be different systems and stuff as compared to in the US. There are only like 4 or 5 vendors, and India is going to be more diverse. But I think that's also the advantage. You can very quickly try and figure out how to build something that allows you to accumulate all that data into one single place, and then run interesting algos on top that allow you to build interesting businesses. In fact, I would say just if you can also make it open access, then lots of other, and make that a platform, then a lot of other people can build on top of it, and then you get the platform advantage.
Question for you. Biden named Leena Khan chairwoman of the Federal Trade Commission, an unexpected move that puts one of the most prominent advocates of aggressive antitrust enforcement against US technology giants in charge of the agency. Also, our government recently announced a panel headed by Nandan Nilekani to prevent digital monopolies. How are you reading this situation?
I think I'm reading it as look, there's nothing wrong with there existing a large company, as long as you say that the products that allow this company to be large, that it is distributing, are of such high quality that the consumers want it, and that's why it is large. But when a large company starts using monopolistic practices which prevent innovation and thus harm consumers, that is a problem that I think every government has. Now, every government has that problem and needs to tackle that problem to make sure that innovation is possible within their country, and it's not stifled in any form by monopolies by saying, let's say if one large marketplace says to all its suppliers that you can't supply to anybody else, if you supply to anybody else who's a competitor, I will stop buying from you, then such a practice would prevent other companies from being able to add more value, which affects the consumer in a bad form, affects the country in a bad form. So I'd say that the problem exists. The way it is being solved, that obviously is devil in the details. I think I like the idea that at least the Indian government is involving people from the business community onto the panel in some form to understand what is feasible and what is not feasible, and what makes sense and what does not make sense, as compared to just having government people on it. There's nothing wrong with government people, but you need that combination of government understanding and explaining that, look, this is what we need to do to protect, this is what we need to protect the people, and taking that feedback from lots of business folks and understand the practical challenges of what is feasible and what is not feasible, and what's going to be beneficial for the consumers long term and what's not going to be beneficial for the consumers long term. So I don't see any problem with there being more investments made by the government into situations to ensure that the consumers are protected long term. I think that just provides for healthy competition long term.
Okay. I'll ask the next question from I'll randomly choose this from Hurun Saptian. I think this question is your advice on building and growing a great global team for a tech startup. How to keep teams inspired and motivated from your vast experience. I think Hurun is building an enterprise SaaS company, which I could luckily invest in the first round. So,
so I think you've got it right. I mean, teams are really, really important today, and no matter what business you're in, because if you have the right quality of people, and as they grow, you grow, and you have to keep that in mind. I think it's also really, really important. I've always felt that keeping the people long term, that's keeping the team that works together and knows how to work together long term, is one of the biggest reasons for success for a lot of businesses that are successful. While hiring the people, you obviously want to basically make sure that you spend an additional amount of time in hiring the right person that fits your culture, and that's a right fit for your business, because it's not good to be everybody's the right fit somewhere, but everyone's not a fit for you, right? I mean, they might be really good in some other company, but they might not be great for you. So spend that time upfront, because if you hire them and then you waste a year in figuring out that they're not the right person, not only are you doing yourself disservice, but you're also doing them disservice, because they could have grown somewhere else, and you basically didn't allow them to grow because you didn't spend that time upfront while recruiting. Now, as far as keeping people is concerned, people only leave for a couple of reasons. First, get the money part out of the way, right? I mean, if you're not going to pay right, I mean, people are going to always look. And no matter how awesome you are, or how mediocre you are, or how below the bar you are, once a person starts looking, in a period of less than 6 months, they will always find a job that pays them slightly more, whether that is 5% more, whether that's 20% more, or that's 40% more than what you're paying. So you have to get people to stop looking. How do you get people to stop looking? You basically have to create an environment where they know that you will always pay, right? To get that out of the way. So that is, once that is completely out of the way, the primary reason why people stop looking outside is if they feel that your company will help them grow and help them keep learning. Help them grow in terms of, if they're doing X number of things, are they going to do X plus Y number of things the year after, and X plus Y plus Z number of things the year after that? Are they going to consistently learn? It doesn't have to be from you because you can't know everything. You just have to make sure that you resource allocate in a form which allows everybody to keep learning and keep growing. If they're going to learn and grow fast enough with you, they're not going to look outside. If you are going to basically not allow them to grow, then they should look outside, because if they're not growing, then they'll grow somewhere else. And if they're not growing in your business, you're better off finding somebody that can help grow your business also. So in that sense, that's at least how I think of it.
Questions coming in for crypto and blockchain. So first, let me ask you, Bitcoin, yes, no?
So I'd say Bitcoin is like SpaceX for me.
Okay, like a rocket, huh? What do you mean is like a rocket?
So let me tell you this. I don't know. I don't know as far as the coin is concerned, but what I do know is I can tell you what I have done. So earlier this year, right, I haven't bought a single coin so far of any coin ever. I have tracked it, and I have lots and lots of smart friends that have made more than $1 billion from that space. So obviously that space has done wonderful for them. Earlier this year, I decided that, look, I still don't understand the coin in many ways, and I don't see how it adds value because there is a government currency that already exists. I'm happy with the current government currency. I've never not trusted it. But I understand that there is a whole set of people that may not have my views and may have other views. And for their reason, and clearly there are enough people now that have bought into it. So is it too big to fail? Because there are more than 100 million accounts that exist that have traded crypto globally, more than 100 million accounts, which means think about the regulatory risk that I always felt existed, because logically governments might regulate this out. I'm like, if 100 million people have this thing, then governments that are democracies can't get rid of it, because that means you're telling your people that I'm going to basically do something that's not going to make you happy. In fact, there are lots of people in the government that will also have invested in it, which also means that essentially they're not going to create policies that are going to be detrimental to themselves. I'm like, I still don't get it, so I will buy the picks and shovels. So buy Coinbase, right? So instead of buying Coinbase, what I did was earlier this year, I bought a bunch of Kraken, which is another crypto exchange. I bought it at a valuation about 4.2 billion in February. It's not public yet, but at some point in time, it's the second or third largest, or something like that. So it'll basically get public, and at that point in time, hopefully, I'll make some money from the blockchain space, in which I haven't made as much. Though me saying that I'm not invested in a coin is wrong. I did one very recently in an ICO that's not come out yet, but it'll come out later in November, is what I'm told. It was by the founders that built the Internet Computer Coin, and they're coming up with something new, and also in addition or top of the Internet Computer Coin, and I've invested in that. So dipping my foot in it, dipping my toes in it, but like staying aware of what's there, but not fully convinced on the crypto functionality itself. But also understand that, look, there's a market there, and it'll be good to learn more about it.
Next question. We'll shut at 6:30 sharp, right? It's going to be one as promised to Divyang. So we have another 5 minutes.
Yeah. So the next question is basically, you spoke about 5G, and what would be the kind of first 5G use case from an Indian perspective, sort of opportunity you would look at?
I think everything will be the first opportunity. There's nothing like the first opportunity. I don't think you should go for the first opportunity anyways. I'd say that the way to do it is look at what others within 5G are doing that you understand well, because it's not about the opportunity and then figuring out that, oh, this is the first thing, whether it's better video calling or it's better, telemedicine, or it's better, like lots of enterprise applications which were not possible because of latency are now going to be possible today because of 5G. So it's more about the industry that you understand. So figure out how will you use 5G within your space, because that's how you'll be able to deploy it in a better form. So now if you have the ability to have no latency and really fast connects, as almost as if it's running on your own computer on anyone else's device, no matter how big, what are the applications that could be good within your space? And that's essentially where you should invest, because 5G is going to be across everything. Most of us don't have the Ambani kind of money to basically buy the 5G infrastructure. So we're going to be service providers on top of the infrastructure layer. So in that sense, in that layer, there are infinite opportunities, and several of those can be built into unicorns and decacorns by themselves, because every industry was going to basically benefit from that pace or speed and cost of connecting everybody at that speed.
Yeah, cool. One question from an 8-year-old listening to this conversation: how do you spend all the money you earn? Probably I'll add one more variable to it. You've also earned time that you can spend at your leisure. So how do you, what do you do for leisure? What are your hobbies? What are the kind of things that you do now?
I mean, I like learning. And so when it's not learning about work, it's learning in something else. And that's, and to me, my hobby has always been aviation. So I fly a few things. In fact, I mean, right now in the last 2.5 weeks, for fun, I'm a helicopter pilot and an airplane pilot and fly other things also. But I flew a helicopter in the last 2 weeks from London to Paris, to Saint-Tropez, to Corsica, to Sardinia, to Malta, to the Amalfi Coast, to Tuscany. And day before yesterday, I landed in Lake Como, and I did that all as part of something that I like doing in my leisure time. So it gives me fun, and it was an incredible experience. And I get to do it with friends, and they can come along, and some of them get very pride basically coming along for very long trips, so they'll join for small parts of it. But it's fun. I like aviation is, I would say, one of my biggest hobbies outside of work. And aviation is one of those sectors in which, as a business person, it's very hard to make money. So I have definitely not tried doing that, because how do you become a millionaire? You start with $1 billion, get into the aviation business, and then and that's how you end up becoming a millionaire.
Yeah. Yatin, do you want to take the last question? You can possibly ask. Yeah.
No, I want to, of course, ask him. We spoke about a lot of things which we also would love to know what are anything missed opportunities, something which you lessons learned from something you missed, something you would go back in time and can change.
So I'd say that if you miss
Not
something,
written about.
So if anyone has a time machine, if you think a missed opportunity is the one that you're going to spend time on, I'd say there are much easier opportunities that you can go back in time and you can buy a bunch of stock that you buy, like Google at its beginning, or Apple at its beginning, or Amazon at its beginning. Instead of learning from my mistakes and my missed opportunities, if I have a time machine, I'd rather be just like spending a few dollars on those kind of opportunities. So I would say that there'd be a way to capitalize. If you had the opportunity to basically have hindsight or go back, then there are better opportunities than the opportunities that I missed that I would definitely capitalize on, as compared to trying to capitalize on what I missed. I would say everybody missed something, right? I mean, because every year, no matter which year, whether there's a global recession, or there's global growth, or there's a global pandemic, or there is whatever is happening in the world, every year there have been X number of companies that have started that year that went on to become one of the top 1,000 companies in the world. Which means every year there are lots and lots of interesting opportunities that exist. Every year within your lifetime, you will get access to lots and lots of opportunities. So it's not the opportunity itself. So it's not like, oh, I missed something, so now I can never basically, it's gone, right? You'll keep getting opportunities. So you never basically regret really missing anything. But in hindsight, no matter who you are and what you are as an entrepreneur, there are obvious things that you could have done differently, would have multiplied what you did, no matter how big you are, right? And that's always going to be the case for everybody. I'll give you the silliest example. My first company was a domain registration company. I was telling every one of my clients that, oh, what you should do is all these really premium domain names are available for really cheap. You should buy them now. They'll be worth a whole lot more in the future. I didn't buy any. So it's more like when you are the broker, you're not thinking of basically buying something for the long term yourself. You're just selling that to other people. So there are lots of, just like that, there will always be missed opportunities. In AgTech, when I was building AgTech businesses, there are lots of trends in the middle that we could have added resources for, which we didn't have. But in hindsight, if we had added that, then it would have been valued at a much higher number. But then with the data that's available at a given point of time, you have to make decisions. And it's better to make a decision faster with 80-90% accuracy than wait to basically get that perfect answer. Because if you wait for the perfect answer, then you're already too late in most circumstances. So just in terms of one of the things that I do while making any decisions is, as long as I get it 80-90% right, just go with it. And then as we get more data, if we have to change the plan, no big deal. I mean, you could be wrong. There's no big, I mean, like everybody's wrong at some point, right? And I'm okay being wrong 10, 20, 30, 40% of the times. As long as I'm right more than half the times, and I take more and more decisions, overall, I'm going to basically get to a point that that is better today than it was 5 years ago. And that's all I'm going for.
I think on that note, we wish to say a special thanks to our ACE achiever, Mr. Divyang Turakia, for agreeing to join with us while on a break. We have a number of millennials, and your message to continue to evolve, optimize, automate, add efficiency, and apply those learnings in our lives is indeed very inspiring. And thank you, Anas and Yatin, for steering this insightful evening. We at IIFL Wealth and Hurun India will continue to bring you interesting conversations with leading entrepreneurs. So stay tuned. Until then, goodbye and stay safe.
Thank you, Dev.
Thank you so much. Fantastic. Thank you.